judge. Are you decide? Sorry, don't have to.
Today, we are faced, I think, with the approach of what may be called the ultimate revolution, the final revolution, where a man can act directly on the mind-body of his fellows. Well, needless to say, some kind of direct action on human mind bodies has been going on since the beginning of time. But this has generally been of a violent nature. The techniques of terrorism have been known from time immemorial, and people have employed them with more or less ingenuity, sometimes with the utmost crudity, sometimes with a good deal of skill acquired by a process of trial and error, finding out what the best ways of using torture, imprisonment, constraints of various kinds. But as I think it was Metternich said many years ago, you can do everything with bayonets except sit on them. That if you are going to control any population for any length of time, you must have some measure of consent. It's exceedingly difficult to see how pure terrorism can function indefinitely. It can function for a fairly long time, but I think sooner or later you have to bring in an element of persuasion, an element of getting people to consent to what is happening to them. Well, it seems to me that the nature of the ultimate revolution with which we are now...
Good afternoon, good evening, everybody. Let me just change the channel here to your own personal stream vibe. Hold on.
Sorry, don't have to.
Don't forget.
Seems to me the ultimate in malevolent
Thank you so much,
revolution,
everybody, for joining today.
And that there seems to be a general
good to see you. Robotech Jenner, hi, welcome.
Of this kind.
We are listening to the voice of George Orwell, describing the possible future as he saw it way back when, in the early 60s. And a lot of what he liked to express was the concern that it's up to us, you and I, the people we know, to make a change. Not just make a change, but be aware of the changes happening, for the better and for the worse, taking a hold of our own mind, our own capability, and not letting, well, the soma, as he would call it, the drug handed to us that feeds us our every whim and desire so that we yearn for nothing, and thereby will buy anything manipulated for us. I have Robotech, that's true. Back in the day when my first big gigs, from mid-97 all the way into 98, before I went out with the Gap Band, I had the great pleasure to work with the DPG. I actually originally worked with Warren G before that. Got the same gig in the same place, but I hijacked the Warren G gig, actually. That's a different story. I've told that before, though. I just made sure that I was always in the rehearsal room, so it was the easy choice. And with Snoop, I was asked, well, I was sweeping trash into a can as a young man. But speaking of which, the least likely things are often the things that affect us in life. They're the ones that we don't expect to take us in other directions, to move us forward or take us onto a path that we, well, couldn't have imagined before, or were imagining and setting our sights towards and didn't know how to get to. Rather, that we took the opportunities in front of us. This is part of the folly of humanity, that we must take these unseen opportunities, that we must find our way through a jungle of darkness, carrying our own inner light to show what's in front of us. And that's part of the being of humanity. It's just how it is. The chaoticness of us, being us, born us, each one of us not asking to be born, but rather being fed into a mill of living and existentialism, of experience, both wondrous and painful, and so much in between. And along the way, some would sell you an idea, sell you many ideas.
Of ultimate revolution, this method of control by which people can be made to enjoy a state of affairs which, by any decent standard, they ought not to enjoy. The enjoyment of servitude. And first, let me talk about a little bit about the improvement even in the techniques of terrorism.
Yeah, and that's one of the things, Lizard Tree, is that some of our toughest experiences, these are the things that make us better people. We either fuck up, fall over, get hit, smacked around, and I mean metaphorically or actually, we fall off the horse or the carriage or the whatever you want to call it. We trip, we fall, and if we don't get back up, if we don't learn how to get back up from that, what are we doing? That's what I would ask, is what are we doing? I would like to say that we are, you and I, trying to find something better. None of us are perfect. None of us are going to find it immediately. It's all just an arc to something that's possible, not guaranteed. And that's where this language of propaganda comes in. Folks will sell you a bill of goods with all the promises of pain now, but promise later. And frankly, I can tell you, that's not what we're here for. We're not here to get pulled down a rabbit hole. We're not here to get dragged down into a clique or group that isn't truly us, that veils who we are to experience life as joyfully as we possibly could. These are, my friends, and hello, Mindful Exposures. Welcome to the show. These are, my friends, important reflections so that we can check out the bias imposing itself upon us, which is what I'm going to talk about today. I don't want to imbue fear. I don't want to remind you that there is so much negativity, because that's the sales point they're trying to get to you. That's the modern propaganda of the media or medium that we're currently on right now. One that Orwell actually envisioned. He talked about at length, where this medium will interact, that the participant will be as much of the show as the practitioner. Which is why I'm always reminding you, this is a show. You may be elsewhere. And just Frank, hello and welcome. So glad to see you all. Exactly. The channel itself wouldn't exist, the moment wouldn't exist without you observing it, which is why the language of propaganda is so dangerous when it's used as a proper tool to leverage folks in one direction or another outside of their true ideas, outside of where they really want to be, outside of who they really want to be. And I would actually gather to say that we're definitely living in a current environment where the propaganda isn't just sold for you and to you directly. Hello, Mystery Sky. Great to see you and welcome. It's sold with you in mind. Now, that's not just a play on words. That is what it is. It's meant to drive each and every one of you away from one another, and to think that some other group is lesser that somebody's supreme, that somebody has a better idea, that somebody's got it all figured out. And I guarantee you, every single one of these, every single person you've ever heard from, whether it's Baba Ram Dass or the Dalai Lama, whether it's the Pope or the President, whether it's somebody you admire or somebody you hate, everybody has a number of things in common. At some point, they're all vulnerable to what they want to believe. And this can be used against each and every one of us in our daily lives to convince us that we're less when we're not part of the whole, even if the whole is willing to commit atrocity or to turn its back on its most vulnerable, or perhaps to divide based off of belief or observable differences. I challenge each and every listener, everybody who's watching, to deny all that bullshit, to not give it its day, to say, fuck that. Think for yourselves, hear the bias in what people want to sell you. If it's normalizing war, normalizing hate, normalizing disenfranchisement, as if every one of your neighbors is somebody to look into, like we're 1953 McCarthyism, I want to warn every single one of you that that can be turned on ourselves just as fast as it's turned on our neighbor. Which is why propaganda, the power of media, the power of a voice, the power of idolatry, the power of icons, is always utilized to leverage people's spirit when they are tired. Robotech Jenner says, say something again in the chat and call me a boy, Lotion God. We'll save that for Aaron after dark. Just Frank says, they avoid propaganda but not watching TV. So I let the internet give you your opinions. You feel good trusting the plan. I also pay per view WWE, so I have that going for you. But that is, if you're gonna pay for propaganda, I got your support on the WWE, because at least you know you're paying for the kayfabe. Yeah. You're good, Robotech. Yeah, it's funny as hell. That was a good quiz. That was a really funny one. It was like on the edge. It was so on the edge. Well done. Well done. You got the warning from Lizard Tree without the actual boot. That was amazing. That was well done.
I think there have been improvements. Pavlov, after all, made some extremely profound observations, both on animals and on human beings. And he found, among other things, that conditioning techniques applied to animals or humans in a state of either psychological or physical stress sank in, so to say, very deeply into the mind body of the creature, and were extremely difficult to get rid of, that they seem to be embedded more deeply than other forms of conditioning. In this context, I would like to mention the extremely interesting chapters in Dr. William Sargent's Battle for the Mind, where he points out how intuitively some of the great religious teachers, leaders of the past, hit on the Pavlovian method. He speaks specifically of Wesley's method of producing conversions, which were essentially based upon a technique of heightening psychological stress
not making
to
fun
the
of
limit by talking about hellfire, and so making people extremely vulnerable to suggestion. And
so vulnerable to suggestion, meaning that, and this is not hypnotism. We're not talking about wee. No, friends, we're talking about reminding you from early age that there is somebody watching your motions, watching your movements, that they can tell where you are, that they can tell whether or not you are going to go to heaven or go to hell. No, absolutely, yeah. Lori, there was no disingenuous. I agree. Most people have been indoctrinated in one form of propaganda or another, whether they knew it or not, or whether they want to believe it or not. We have all been filled with a fable or lore, also called the noble lie, meaning there could be an immense amount of truth to it. Yeah, Santa had a list. True. And by the way, not to dismiss anybody's faith or belief at all, I believe having faith is incredibly important to being a strong-willed human. It gives us a sense that we're part of something much greater than ourselves. And I can't disagree with anybody if they have that sense of connectiveness, because we can see in the science now that's true, which is why this Pavlovian practice works. When you repeat, when you imbue, when you take for granted, and you spread that information repeatedly, the people who were born with it, born around it, grew up with it, expect it, or want to believe it, will parrot this, whatever it be. And you're going to just extrapolate that across all kinds of boundaries, from the minute to the mass. You can look at advertising, built of the, I believe he was the nephew of Freud, from public relations on outward, the revision of idea to fit both a positive narrative that one will accept. Used to be a blanket idea, meaning there used to be a lot of people it would apply to. And now you and I live in an atmosphere where the message is individual. The disenfranchisement, that pipeline comes straight to your house for you, and you pay for it. And subscribing to cult utterances doesn't exactly exhibit critical thinking. True, absolutely. We should all utilize that critical thinking in listening to what's being said, even if we're viewing it for entertainment, which we should remind ourselves, this is entertainment. When there is a cult, it tends to be only obvious to those who aren't in the cult. So that's something also. But there are signs. I've covered it in a number of shows, but I should probably do it again coming up here. We learn from the insights of others, absolutely. Rarely do we evolve from those who we think only similarly to ourselves. And in most cases, does that even allow us to evolve, Lori? I would actually argue I don't think it does. When we just simply repeat what's around us, we don't take ourselves anywhere. And that's part of the greater danger of propaganda. It seeks to limit one's actual growth or society's growth. It seeks to impose an idea or concept. It seeks to keep people in a box so they're easily tagged, tracked, controlled. Hi everybody, I'm AronMSound, and this is the show known as Lookup, where I interject myself into a conversation that, well, frankly, nobody asked me to be a part of, and by way of which I tend to take it places nobody wants it to go. Tonight, well, we're talking about propaganda. That old advertisement that sells directly into your brain, selling you something that you probably even want, or believe you want at least, or in some cases just want to be a part of, or maybe it looks great. It's never going to be something that's simple, ever. In fact, most of the time it's going to be something really built for you. Something that's going to come that you might agree with full-heartedly. But especially in the nowadays, we have to be careful that what we're watching and what we're listening to and what we're agreeing with, we put that old school layer of questioning authority. The suspension of disbelief is healthy because you're suspending your belief, and you could take it back real quickly. To give into a story is one thing. To give into people's manufactured realities is a whole chain of events that is easily fallen into to the point where we see in the environments we're in underbellies of groups, cliques that are infighting as if they're at some imaginary table. They would call themselves communities because they believe themselves to be one, when in the most cases, none of them have ever met, which is fine. You can believe what you want about the people that you keep as friends. But I would actually argue, or at least pose to you, the audience, that much of this belief, often pushed by the hosts, those streamers who maybe they grew up in this environment, or maybe they want to use this environment to influence you directly because, social influence, media influencer, these are meaningful terms to some folks. Those that don't really actually have a background in entertainment, let's say. So my warning here is to always at least be aware of where the message and who the message is coming from and why. Because most folks that aren't there to entertain you directly are there to sell you something. Whether it's an idea, a product, a river, or a bridge. Trust but verify is very valuable in this case. And I say that because we should trust. We should be able to just watch and trust. And Lori Sue says she once briefly joined the Unitarian Church and quickly discovered it was like any other large group of people, complete with cliques, money, was power. It was disingenuous, hypocritical, and saddening. Saxon 7, welcome on in. Mr. DeMille, well, you're always welcome to the close-up. The call-in lines, of whichever you choose, are open. We're doing C-SPAN one at a time, no debates. So, but it's more about the conversation of the propaganda that's existing today. And one of the things that's brought this up, actually, and it doesn't surprise me, Lori, by the way, it doesn't surprise me that you would experience the minutia of normal life, of social life. Yeah, hypervigilant old men. Nobody wants to see, I want to quote a friend, nobody wants to see a middle-aged rapper. Meanwhile, tour managing middle-aged rappers, that's what she does. Anyways, totally out of context statement about somebody none of you know. Hostilities, a pretty face. Oh, I love that. That should be a line. That is a line. Yeah, no matter where you go, humanity is going to be involved. Social systems, hierarchy, sense of supremacy, people's disingenuous behavior, those that are trying to get one on the other, there's never going to be cut out. Those that pretend that that isn't a case are seeking valor where it doesn't exist, I would argue. That's my opinion on that. But let's hear a little more from our friend over here, Mr. Huxley.
Suddenly releasing this stress by offering hopes of heaven. And this is a very interesting chapter of showing how completely
I missed that. I'm sorry, I missed the
on purely intuitive and empirical grounds, a skilled natural psychologist, as Wesley was, could discover these Pavlovian methods.
Being used on humans.
As I say, we now know the reason why these techniques worked, and there is no doubt at all that we can, if we want to, carry them much further than was possible in the past. And of course, in the history of
and when he says carry them much further,
brainwashing, both as applied to prisoners of war and to the lower personnel within the Communist Party in China, we see that the Pavlovian methods have been applied systematically and with evidently with extraordinary efficacy. I mean, I think.
So what he's talking about is the application of not only back in the day actual torture, but a form of repeat indoctrination, a form of pressure or pain. Your choice, Saxon. Those are totally up to you. Speaking of which, hold on a second. I don't think I've. Oh shit! I just pressed the wrong button, but that's okay. Oh. Speaking of which, somehow my Discord did go away, so... Oh, no, it didn't. I've got a new setup today. I added some things specifically so Discord wouldn't drag everything down. So, and of course I just clicked on it on the other computer. Anyways, let me get back to my point. I actually wanted to talk about this because I heard that folks were really concerned about their favorite debate Twitch poll streamers being paid for, as if they were propagandizing themselves or selling themselves out to a high bidder. And I have to say that may be a form of propaganda, because just about anything could be propaganda at that point. And propaganda has a wide scale of where it is just advertising and interest and support and sponsorship, because in that case you could call Da Vinci's portraits propaganda for the patrons who paid him to make those paintings. Or perhaps we could talk about the buildings around us being propaganda. In some cases, I'd actually agree, because there's definitely iconography on some of them in the world that tell you who owns the building and what they represent. And sometimes Lizardtree, being the lone wolf, is not only advantageous, but it puts you in a position to stand outside and watch the synthesis, or gain synthesis, meaning like figure the dialectic out in a positive or negative way, see whether or not there's a value in the message being given and what that value becomes. Notice how I didn't say what it was. And the reason I would make a difference in that, or say that there was a difference, is because it takes a bit of perspective. One has to be able to stand outside the message and check whether or not it's coming from a slant, whether or not it's coming from a place that is intending to get you on its side, or if it has your interest in it at all. And mind you, look, some of these messages, they could be helpful. There's propaganda in positivity. Folks will get you to completely forget that you're sitting on planet Earth because they got you feeling so good. Now here's the difference. Whether it's making you feel bad or making you feel good, the propaganda becomes dangerous when it is a call to action. When it is a large group who is motivated by whomever is speaking. Which is why I have in my background today this picture, just to remind everybody to be this man right here. And propaganda, it's true, works on those unwilling to vet the premise, data or lack of data. It's easy to be a follower, and there's about 20% of us who wish to be that follower, or are that follower just naturally. Those who are easily hypnotized, frankly, is what it comes down to. It's easy to be a follower. It takes action, intelligence, insight, and time to be discerning. Yes, and there's a wide swath in the center that is harder to manipulate, harder to get to. And then there's the other side that doesn't acknowledge any of it at all. It's only about 15% of the total public, and we're talking about on the planet. So when you think about in-group or out-group, or you think about awake or woke or whatever the hell you want to call it, there's never going to be a majority of people that aren't going to want to go with the mainstream. It sounds terrible, right? Only until you remember that mainstream is dictated by what's best for the whole. And it only will dip into what's not good for it in periods. How long those periods are, it's not for me to say, but we can look at history and say that, you know, there's good times and bad. No matter what, we as a species, and this is what I would actually pose as more important, and some of you might not like it, we as a species grow. We become more free. We become more open-minded. We become more inclusionary. We become more intellectual. We become more spiritual. We become more like the universe surrounding us. Magical, mystical, wild, and yet grounded. Currently, though, we are in a state where technology has its hands around our brain, feeding many of us a pill of our own flavor that gives us the message that we want and builds us into a fervor or a fear or a anxiety or a happiness or an elation, feeding a dopamine hit. That's exactly what Huxley was talking about. That soma, that drug that in small amounts makes us feel pleasure, in larger amounts gets us to pacify, and in its totality wipes our personality so that we are controllable to follow the whole. That is the lower 20% I started talking about. We live in a complicated, non-binary world. One where there are more options and possibilities and plausibilities. So the messaging is often going to be brought to you by anybody who can or is interested in bringing it. Of the 15% of those who cannot be or won't be hypnotized by a larger propaganda, whatever that be, who want to go their own way, who have a message because of their observation or their synthesis. That 15%, that's what I'm talking about, at least in this moment, and how if you don't trust your streamer because they got paid to host an argument or a concept, and you see that that streamer is not a wealthy person, that they don't get a lot of money out of their stream, that they aren't streaming to thousands of people, they aren't making major motions with people's mindsets because they aren't somebody, name. If you're concerned about that person taking money for what is their art to entertain you or others, then I'm concerned that you've actually bought into the worst kind of propaganda. It's one that gaslights reality. And that's actually what I'd like to talk about today. You see, you and I, if you live in the United States at least, or in the Western world, have been indoctrinated into a long-term, slow comfort of living. We live in the most peaceful time ever. And so some of our critical thinking about what it is, things are, news articles, information we receive, all kinds of things, the products we use, even the beliefs we have. These are all things we have come to know if we live here and have our whole life, and have come to taken for granted, these concepts in the Western world. That said, when you stand back a little bit, you'll find out that you and I live in a place of propaganda just like everywhere else. A noble lie to keep us believing that our supremacy of enjoyment is just that. And in this supremacy of enjoyment, the almighty dollar in our culture is king. And that's number one to remember, which is why people don't trust when you get paid. I understand that. But I go back to the fact that if we don't have some kind of equality, some kind, and people aren't able to recognize what that equality is, and they're willing to smash down the tiny voices while the big ones not only get wealthy off the pain that they don't sell you an answer for, but if we're willing to ignore them and put the fear about them onto the little artists, the little folks, the little speakers on the corner, if we're willing to knock the soapbox out from underneath those people, what have we become? It's time for us to take part in the critical thinking. It's time for us to stand back and say, look, the group that I chat with online, that I don't see, that doesn't smell me, that doesn't see me, that doesn't know me on a daily, they may not be as important. That this may be a product of Producer Moose. What's happening? Good evening. Yeah, true. Cliches are the responses. They are usually just repeating what is the general consensus or the mob mentality. And it keeps people repeating them because, well, that's just the way things are, right? That's just how things are. That's a form of propaganda. There's so many little subtle formats of it, and it's whether we recognize what the level of it is, and we don't lambast or make all of them some kind of knee-jerk reactionary problem. To recognize the ones that are the problem from the ones that aren't the problem. That's why I've started with relating all this to, well, the fact that propaganda is anything we see in our lives that sells us an idea, including advertising. We just have a lot of nomenclature for it. Advertising is the number one. And also praise Bob. True. And thank goodness for it, because without that, a lot of my ideas of how to peep biasing, understand when somebody's trying to sell me a bill of goods, or know when it's just entertainment or that kind of thing, I'm thankful for that. I think there's a good portion of people that really do need little Bob in their life. And if you don't know what that is, it's a very confusing art scene, strange. Some of it's occult, but it's not. It's the explanation of how, and the key, the wink, that our life is totally filled with propaganda. It's the artist wink at you to let you know that somebody paid them to pull one right over your own eyes. Because you too can pull the wool right over your own eyes. And most people tend to. People want to feel comfortable. People want to be incited to feel important. So when you give them these prizes, when you give them these pieces of attention, however small they are, when you give them the inclusion into some angry group that is going to make something work and happen, especially when they're tired, when they're worn down, you can get them to do just about anything. Believe anything. Fall into anything. Which is why I would point out the differences in a couple of small streamers who maybe get 30 or 40 people listening and arguing in their channel, comparative to people who have tens of thousands, if not millions of viewers, being paid by major organizations across the board, raking in millions of dollars to sell you junk you don't need. There's a big difference between those things. And if the online culture, if the streamer culture, if the content-brained, limited mindset of cliquish behavior is that important, well, they're not going to be reached. But I hope to at least reach out with this message to say it's time to start using your critical thinking to understand that there is a skew, a slant, a whole arc of interests and problems that are way worse than your favorite streamer getting paid, and good on them to host a topic by a political group if they're a political streamer. And if they forgot to mention it, it's definitely not for nefarious purposes. It's just because it's freaking streaming. It's not a TV show, although I tend to tell everybody to remind themselves that it is. No, it's way more informal. On a TV show, you'd have a prompter and you would never forget, and it would be on the credits that would roll by because it's on law. And maybe sometime we'll catch up to that. And regurgitating the cycle, yeah, true, is a problem with even where we're at right now. I mean, it has to do with the fact that the viewing choices are controlled by an algorithm that only feeds you what it thinks you want, which is even more problematic. So let's talk about that as propaganda. It's a quiet propaganda. Oh, Smith, what's happening? Good to see you. Been loving your streams, by the way. The burrito was... Sorry, hold on a second. Let me just do this properly. The burrito was genius. That was... Gotta give it to you. If you by the way, if you didn't know, if you didn't see Smith's burrito, you missed something. All right. Anyhow, people cared about that so much, Smith, I would say, because one, it's easier to feel part of the group if you're angry and then everybody's angry with you. It's a simple and basic fear emotion. And top it off, the complex portion of it is they really truly saw it as a degradation of some kind of entitled truth or entitled valor of folks that should be making a living, should be being paid by think tanks, should be paid by supporters and sponsors, because the viewers aren't. These people work really hard. And they're bringing boring ass topics that otherwise would not be covered, but are still very important to the public's eye, to the group that wants to see it. Propaganda, right, to the group that wants to see it. Except that's even funnier. What's totally missed about it is that this is a group who regularly takes part and fear attacks the immunity. Yeah, absolutely. Oh, and thank you, Lizard Tree, for putting that in there. True. Art in the art house. Real Smith's art is fantastic. If I could afford to, I would definitely be buying the picture of the little girl that's you. So, it looks, I know it's a little boy. I'm just fucking. Yeah, this is the other thing is Smith, I would agree, and I'll read your topic here. I think Wick acted too defensive, and his tone made him look bad too. Now, I would say that he actually, in my opinion, acted as defensive as anybody would for the getting attacked the way he did. But the fact that he was attacked at all for that put him on a proper defensive. So, of course, it's going to sound terrible to anybody who's looking for something wrong, which is the complicity of both sides. It's the duplicitousness of those who are basically acting in valor, or trying to valor signal to all their friends that they caught somebody doing something. Now that Mama Max is now that whole like pedo scene is taking the same route as the red pill, which, by the way, I mean the pedo hunter scene. And by the way, kids, leave that to the professionals. Most of y'all been fucking it up for them anyhow, right? That's real. It's no question they're out there not supporting that shit. But the point is if you're trying to be that sleuth for other people while you're making videos, go fucking just jerk off in a corner. You're doing more for the world, for real. And that's from me to you. Anyhow, it really is important that people know what their lane is. And I don't mean like, oh, you can't be there, you can't say that. No, I don't mean that. I mean If you're not a police officer and you're online and you witness something that's illegal, please report that crime to the proper authorities. Don't pretend you're the authorities and then gather your friends on Discord and decide that you're all sleuths and then hold 22 meetings in a VC and then you stream it, all right? That's fucking propaganda. Hold on a second. Let me just... Sorry, I had to clear my brain. I'm back now. Yeah, I'm back. Hold on a second. Had to shake that up. I'm still working on the up view. I'm still working on this one. Anyways, totally out of context. Camera angles. Look, there is a chance in the coming future that we could be facing much worse propaganda from much bigger figures that have been standing in the background this whole time. What am I talking about? I'm talking about the fact that we in the United States have a very powerful military organization that feeds us, well, our national pride, the noble lie. And so do most countries. You had to quickly lobotomize. True. Absolutely. Free education, absolutely. Free education is one of the keys, and free higher education is one of the keys to being able to allow people to have critical thinking or, higher levels of thinking, contemplation, the ability to really see the gray zones and all of the values of all the colors in between in anybody's, belief, lifestyle, behaviors, you name it. And the concern is that in the near future, heading into the elections, we're going to see a lot more of this rhetoric, hyperbole from the reactionary folks who have already been indoctrinated into these fear states. While they call out that there's propaganda on the other side, they themselves are succumbing to the propaganda. We would have said the pot is calling the kettle black, but I'd say it's the soma eaters versus those of us who are fully awake and aware. Yeah, if anybody has a channel, make sure to let us know. Happy to spread your love. Because honestly, I'm all about positive propaganda. I'm not gonna lie, that's what this shit is. Come on. If you didn't know, now you do. Anyhow, come on, folks. What do you think you're watching? And why are you watching it if you're not there to learn or hear something that you want to hear? And with that said, by the way, let me just cleanse your brain palette for a second, because I think this is important. Stand by, please.
Storytime with Tomfoolery presents Do You Want to Play With My Balls? Hey, Louie.
Oh, fun.
Do you want to play with my balls? Sure, Chuck. I can hold your ball sack so it won't
if I
drag
was
on the
disturbed,
ground.
I would be saying
Wow,
that this is the
your
right
balls are
wing,
so big,
this is the
I can't
left-wing
even
media
fit them
trying to
in
get
my
your
mouth.
kids
My mum's always yelling.
into strange
"Lou,
sexual ideas.
Get those balls out of your mouth before you choke."
No, this is
You know
just
that
a book
mean
about
girl, Sally?
children playing with balls.
She squeezed my balls so hard, they looked funny. Yeah, well, when I play with Sally, I
Hi,
always end up
Bridget.
with
I'm sorry, I
blue
forgot to say hi
balls.
to you earlier. I was
Billy
too monologuing.
Johnson made Sally cry last week.
This is from the
Now that
iTomfoolery
kid's
channel.
got
This is an
balls.
actual...
Not anymore.
This is an
Yesterday,
actual
Sally
children's
kicked
book.
Billy's balls so hard he
So
lost
horrible.
one. Look, Louie, your dog is licking my balls. Let's roll them on Sparky's fur. Girls hate hairy balls.
Is that true?
You know, Chuck,
I mean,
if we
like...
show Sally our hairy balls, she'll scream for sure. Yeah, but I don't know. I kind of like Sally.
Okay, have I taken off? Okay, so anyhow, the point being is that anything that you want to be slanted, we could have taken that bias 12 different directions right there. You could have looked at it from the side of the puritanical and said, oh my God, it's children talking about blah, 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 blah. Or you could have looked at it like, well, a million different ways. You could turn this channel into something terrible because you'd think that I was trying to sell this to you instead of just laughing about it because it's so fucking absurd. And by the way, tomfoolery. I got there because I was typing in tomfoolery channel and I got tomfoolery for somehow and pops up. It's all stories like this. If you want to laugh for like an hour, this channel is very good for the spirit and hilarious. And you know, if some of these Discord brains found this channel, it'd probably get struck down because they're too busy being puritanically driven by some propaganda that has more to do with, oh yes, you are definitely the most uplifted supreme person. Oh goodness. And this is what we have to be concerned with. Because very quickly, my friends, very quickly, that shit turns into this. And you may think, oh no, Nazism, everybody's just killed that word. Fuck that. That word is just as powerful and palpable today as it ever was. Why? Because that is the great example of how propaganda, dog whistles, can take over an entire country and get people to push, well, a nihilism about evil. And that's the propaganda I want to really delve into now. The normalization of things like hate, difference, and xenophobia in a country that is nothing less than a melting pot from the get-go. You want some propaganda? Let me tell you how amazing our nation is. Since the beginning, our forefathers, although they were of the time period, comparatively not the greatest people in the now. And we can either forgive or not their indiscretions as comparative to the now. But I'd like to look at them as how they were and how they were respected at the time. Great thinkers. Great idealists who saw the possibility of a greater nation and left the rules and laws in our Constitution open to be interpreted and changed and added to, unlike any other constitution on the planet unless it was copied from us. It was not founded to be one religion or one people. And of those limitations, we have adapted that Constitution to change for inclusion over and over again through strife, through struggle, through war, through civil war. We as a people, made up of the people of the planet, we go through hell and come out as angels because we are the future of the world. We are what it looks like. The struggle, the distrust, the balancing act that goes up and down, teeter-totter, politically, socially, financially. But without you and I coming from wherever we came from, there would be no us. Period. This is not a place where nationalism is the only way to be. No, in fact, from the get-go, our earliest forefathers told us to question authority, to look twice at the laws, to ask about them, to take part, but to verify. And initially, they wanted us all to take part. Oh yes, I'm sorry, now that I see this. Bridget, you definitely do know Lizard Tree. For certain. Mike TV. Oh, wait, hold on. Mike TV. Yeah, anyhow. There is no way that we go back. That's my propaganda on there. No way to go back. And the only way is forward, and forward is wider, not thinner. We're going to get fat with all the love and the intelligence that we gather, all the new people, all the new biases, all the new arguments, all the new xenophobias. We'll add them in. And we'll take what is important and we'll throw the rest out. Now, getting there is going to be a lot of rhetoric from a lot of different sides. And right now, there's a major loud noise, screaming from almost every corner of the streaming world. It's saying, if you're not us, you're nothing. You must be evil if you don't agree. And that normalizes a hatred. You add to that the idea that somehow internet viewers are the best sleuths and police officers, when we're just normal people, and if you don't carry a badge, you shouldn't be playing like you have one. But once again, you should also be a good citizen and not act like it's not your responsibility to report crime when you see it. And also act like you are a citizen of the world, to respect others and their values, wherever it be. But when you use this space as a form of personal propaganda to hate, you are normalizing the banality of evil. What does that mean? Well, it is being comfortable with telling people to off themselves. It's being comfortable with telling people that, well, they're terrible or horrible, or screaming at them when you're on a VC, or demanding your own way. Things you would never do in a public space, in a public place, or when you're at work or at the bar or at a restaurant with friends. Things you would absolutely just never socially do, folks have become very comfortable doing here in streaming, and that is because of the propaganda telling them it's okay. Now, where does that propaganda come from? Tiny little motions, my friends. Tiny little behavior sets. Tiny little allowances. Part of it is the algorithm and what it feeds you and what you're willing to look for. It's you. It's me. We all are part of it. We all have a responsibility.
Post-operative cases where several hundred men and women suffering comparable kinds of pain after serious operations were given injections whenever they asked for them, whenever the pain got bad, and the injections 50% of the time were of morphia and 50% of the time were of distilled water. And about 20% of those who went through the experiment, about 20% of them got just as much relief from the distilled water as from the morphia. About 20% got no relief from the distilled water, and in between were those who got some relief or got relief occasionally. So here again we see the same sort of distribution. And I suspect also that it would not be at all difficult to recognize in very early childhood who were those who were extremely suggestible, who were those who were extremely unsuggestible, and who were those who occupied the intermediate space. Quite clearly, if everybody were extremely unsuggestible,
yes, ma'am,
organized society would be quite impossible.
If everybody was completely suggestible, organized society would be quite impossible. It's us. It's not just the social media or the advertisement. It's the capitulation to become part of it. As somebody who has fed into that mill myself, I can tell you right now, I have seen the difference in the audiences. I've seen the differences that the sales point or the fear-based sales point mechanisms have built. How the responses used to be to question what was said to you. And now they go to absolute belief or absolute disbelief and nothing in between, and a fighting posture. And it's whether or not people actually want to be part of this that gives its fervor. The things that started this long before anybody picked up a cell phone or an iPad. The behaviors of the Maury Povich and things of that nature, the daytime TV, just translated into what people don't recognize is still a show. The problem became when the propaganda became real life TV, became real life. So how do we back out of this? How do we move away from this? We have to deprogram ourselves individually and those around us. You have to turn off. You have to tell people who seem like they need to log off that they need to log off in the nicest of ways. And by the way, science, information, that isn't going to help you. Propaganda, it is a hell of a drug. It'll have people believing that their own shit tastes better than filet mignon. Especially if it's something that makes them feel pride. Something that will get them to buy into just about any idea of xenophobia, general phobia. Folks would believe the sky is falling if enough people looked up. That's just the human nature. And not everybody. There's always going to be an outlier. The question is whether the outlier turns to the people around him and says, this isn't really what's important. The thing that we're crying about right now, that's not really the root of the problem. Have we talked this problem into nonsense? Oh, that's the greater propaganda. The change of language. The change of history. You see, Orwell reminded us, they will change very minutely in tiny little fashions over the course of a long period of time. And who is they? They is you and I. We will slowly forget and manipulate and not substantiate over and over the truths or facts of time, history, our own facts of being. We will slowly change them, and a meaning of one word will become something completely different later on, despite the fact that that meaning is still the same. Now, what does that mean? I can give you example over and over and over again, where nowadays on the Twitch poll circuit, you have to bring a book of definition that is separate from the dictionary. One that you've made of each individual panel member to understand what words, even the word definition, what their definition of definition is. And that is a problematic mirror of 1984 that is beyond propaganda. It's where it becomes Pavlovian mindset. Because the person who has now been indoctrinated doesn't even know that they're repeating the mantra of a propaganda long built long before they were born. There's always been fad words. There's always been cliquish ideas. But when you see thousands upon thousands of people following a cult of personality, using very specific in-group words or changing the definitions outside of them. Sam Vaknin, oh yeah, says we have a narcissist culture that started during the Renaissance. This is, to be fair, true. As soon as we were able to clearly see ourselves in a mirror. Although there's a certain healthy set of narcissism, I would argue that is an important component to self-assuredness, and all those things, just like psychopathy and sociopathy. There's all little components of these things in a healthy mind. And in some cases, you can't even tell the difference between a highly functioning mind and a psychopathic mind in an MRI, but that's a totally different discussion. I totally agree. Yeah, gotten a lot of good from pointing out every day. Oh, you're a little different though, Smith, because at least you're using the definitions and not the ones you made up. I feel like, Smith, that someday we're just going to find you naked in the mirror and we're just going to see... I just gave you a terrible idea for a show. But you won't be able... Anyways, it'd be the front view. You know, you're actually looking at the mirror in the camera, but you're just off of the... So you can never see you. You know what I mean? That would be the one where we go, oh, he's reached his narcissism mark. There we go. I can't see you going full narc. I hate that I just said that, by the way. Because I rallied against the term narc as a single subject when Brittany said narcissist. Okay, narcs are people that bust you for having drugs. Let's just get that straight. Anyways. Oh yeah, welcome to the Mod Squad. Those of you that, sorry, I didn't ring the bell for you. I have the picture of the Zeke Heiling over there. Welcome to the Mod Squad, everybody who got one. Thank you very much. Oh, shit! Hold on a second. Hardcore. Thank you so much, Mystery Sky. That is all. Whoa! That's amazing! That's amazing! Thank you so much! What the hell? Oh my god, that's amazing! What the hell? Thank you so much. That is really, really cool. Thank you so much. Everything you give to the show goes right back into the show. The next purchase is actually going to be a Elgato switcher thing, so I can do that stuff without clicking on the button over here. I'm just gonna have a whole bay of them over here. Thank you so much. That is really, really kind of you. And sponsorship goes a long way. And someday I will end up having probably memberships or something. I still haven't figured that all out. And I think I should get more subs before I start looking towards that. But merch is on the way. I do have some merch that I've been designing, but I'm still playing with it. Anyways, I'm almost gonna go back to doing the flying pig just to have a flying pig in my merch anyways. But thank you so much. That means a lot. And thank you for supporting my art and the message. I missed that route, Smith. I probably had a couple chances, pretty solid ones, but tour life was never really. There was never a time where I was like, yeah, this is what right now, right before I head out for 9 months is right when I'm gonna settle down. And then I come home and be like, no, I'm staying home now. And then somebody'd offer me something, and I'd be like, oh, 10 months later, and that. When people say that they make a trade or deal with the devil, that's the deal they're talking about. You trade normal life. And if I do have kids, I don't know about them. Anyhow, thank you very much. I probably, I do love kids. I probably would have been a good dad. Yeah, just timing never happened, and I'm fine for it. I'm like, neither way. I have 2 cats and a dog. That's more than enough. That's what I mean. I mean, that's not kids, and I have 7 nieces and nephews and all sorts of families. So I'm good. But thank you. I do. No, I love kids. Kids are, and that's influencing people. And I had a bunch of great mentors, by the way, or like an incredibly large amount of great mentors, all the way until the last probably 5 or 6 years, as some of them have started to pass away. And now my mentors have become more of my friends, you know, or my friends are my mentors, because the people that I appreciate or look up to, Burt Blackrat, Akil, the J5MC. There's so many more, you know, that you don't know. Wally, E.B. Wally, James Magaman. He'll be showing up at some time. These are all people I look up to, who are my friends, have been my friends since I was a kid, and I'm really blessed to have that, because that's one of the things I think that is the reason why propaganda holds so strong in people's minds. I think that quite often, ooh, what happened here? I think quite often people don't have the input of, well, folks of quality thinking. If that makes any sense, or folks of authoritative background, or folks who have any well-meaning to them, that want to see others do well. And in fact, I find in the streaming world, there's a lot of sense that people are going to do you wrong, which is the easiest way to get folks to believe negative propaganda. Why else would everybody leap to some kind of... Why would people who are most reactionary leap to conclusions that somehow Wick or somebody else was doing something wrong, and, oh my God, look at him, he's being defensive, so he must have done something wrong, when the reality is very simple to think about. Now that's proof that it's very easy to create subversion, which is my final point of the evening. And this is probably most important. You see, my friends, since 2012, when a Chinese submarine landed itself alongside a Russian submarine at the bottom of the ocean in the eastern Atlantic and attached themselves to an information pipeline so that they could interject in any of the networks on the planet, both receiving and sending, which caused the U.S. to do the same. If you didn't know, yes, there are 3 submarines sitting at the bottom of the ocean attached to an information pipeline, feeding every form of information. Disinformation, counterinformation. Since 2012, an information war has been raging under our feet. And I want you to think back. It's probably about the time you started noticing that memes were more popular. It's just about the time when QAnon was building out of nationalist groups. So much more. Much less, when's the first time you ever heard about the gender battle? That wasn't an ERA concept. These are things I want you to think about, because you can track them all back to these submarines landing on an international information line and starting to feed our most vulnerable young minds with every form of negative propaganda they could. And the adults as well. Now, if you're concerned about mass media, you're not looking in your own backyard for what you should be concerned about. It's the errant and sliding ideas. Meaning, you start with what seems to be humor and then follow down a roll and road, say in a Reddit post or a Twitter post or a Facebook group. It's all fun and games to start with, always. And then the further and further down the hole you go, Smith, the more isolated you become, the more angled and biased the language will become. Now some, Smith, your age, have been inundated with that culture since probably you can remember. It's what you know of phones and dealing and interacting with the devices. And that's why I've always been trying to speak to a group that's here that are willing to listen. Because, frankly, I know what I've been looking at. I have a whole other set of subversive programs focused at me and my group of friends. But the one that I've actively used myself is way more obvious to me, because I used it on a group in the course of doing my job, understanding what the mob wants, understanding what the mob mentality needs to keep them safe. These basic tools of psychology are not unknown to the quote-unquote meme mills. These folks who find out who you are, what you're interested in, and then they produce en masse messages for you. And those have flooded and become part of our everyday life, to the point where most would not even recognize the difference between one or the other. And we're about to head into an age of AI, where it'll be writing those messaging for someone that wants to manipulate your feelings. And that's what it really comes down to. Forget about your almighty dollar. The bigger war here is the subversion of our social systems, suggesting that one is more supreme than another, suggesting that somebody has it out for you. Well, that's all anybody ever needed to do, because if you can separate a community, if you can separate an actual physical community and replace it, supplant it with one that doesn't exist, one that nobody can trust, you can undo an entire society overnight. And all you have to do is turn out the lights. Think about that. Think about what I'm saying again. It is very easy to undo an entire society if that society is built up of people who don't trust each other, much less who are combined into isolated, non-truly interacting groups who call themselves communities when they are not actual communities in the real world. All you have to do to snuff all that out and cause mayhem is turn out the lights. Now, you're gonna say, Aaron, why aren't you doing the negative propaganda? Hey, dude, hey, bro, aren't you? Hey. I mean, yeah, but I'm gonna give you a solution. Log off. Go check out what's going on outside. Meet your neighbors. Find a better hobby. You can still be here. You can still enjoy the shows. Enjoy them as shows. See them as entertainment. Question the authority. Trust but verify. Be aware that the ones in the world who don't have your best interest want to sell you something, and or want to sell you self-hatred, hatred of others. You're always going to be able to trust somebody who just wants you to feel better and pay attention to the world around you and be you. That's a basic thing. And normally, if you can't trust them, they'll come with and by the way, I have this amazing product that you can trust me for. You know, that's the con. That's why I'm reminding you that if you're not watching things that you're entertained by and that you're feeling like you're taking part in, rather, you may be buying into a form of urban warfare that subverts our actual society, converts what should be our society into a false society, a sense of connection where there is actually none, so that when that sense of connection is taken away, the floor is gone and a vacuum of power is created. My friends, this is hypothetical. But as I have said many times, I war game for fun. It is 2023, 11 years after the information pipeline was interceded. We, as a nation in the U.S., have been receiving reports. You can look at the DoD Twitter page or the Pentagon's information service or Reuters and see that heightened reports of infiltration of, well, infrastructure, power, atomic, you name it, telephone lines, cell phones. Our system is being tested. And not just by one side, but by several. Anybody who doesn't like us. Now, if they've come that far, what's to say that they wouldn't go further? Because we won't be invaded by plane, my friends. We won't be run over by tanks. We won't have a valid or valorous fight that won't be with ourselves. And in that fight with ourselves is where, when we're looking the wrong way, buying into the propaganda sold to us by anyone who would hope to get the real estate cheap while there's blood in the streets. But folks, while our heads are turned, that's when the problem lays. Because we as a nation are only as good as the recognition that we are the future of humanity. The promise of integration, the promise of a new world where we can work out the struggles of all of the people, that we don't have to be bound by the country we were born in, that there's opportunities for everyone, no matter how hard they are. I mean, that's not a given, by the way, but rather that we of the Western world won't be looking the wrong direction when the bar comes in low. Which, my friends, there's only one thing to say. I think you know what that is. It's up to us, you and I, to say, look up. Thank you so much for joining today. I appreciate you listening to my rant about propaganda and my suggestions and my own propaganda additionally. I'll be back, I think it's tomorrow. Do I have oh no, I haven't put a new one up. I'll have a whole slew of things coming up this week. More Philosophers Stoner next week as well. I've got some other topics to cover, but yes, thank you so much for being here. I'm AronMSound, and as usual, this is the show known as Look Up. I hope all of you have a wonderful Saturday. What day is it? We're in Saturday now. Wonderful Saturday evening. And if you can, avoid all the propaganda hate towards others. It's just trying to sell you up a river. And you know how to avoid falling in the river, right? Keep your head high. Be safe or have fun, all. Or whichever comes first. But most off, look up. This show has been brought to you by the Dank. Click.